Awesome. Thank you so much for that kind intro, Julie. I am really pleased to be here. As mentioned, I'm from the Center on Rural Innovation. I lead our tech-based economic development work. And just a little bit about me, I actually always wanted to solve systems change and work at a level that could really bring impact and innovation. And that led me to working in Silicon Valley at a high-tech social impact startup accelerator and incubator. But in the half a decade or so I was doing that, I had the sinking feeling year over year that while there were amazing innovations and tools and frameworks coming out of those programs, we should surely be able to distribute these kinds of tools and resources and opportunities across our country. Because I myself am from a small town and really just wanted to find a way to get back home one day. So excited to be here today and share with you all that I did in fact make it home. I'm one of those boomerang individuals who lived away for 10 plus years and now have come back to my hometown, and very privileged to get to do this work remotely, travel all across the country and speak to folks like you all who have built real momentum towards a digital future for your region and are at a very exciting pivotal moment to galvanize further alignment, strategy, and action to understand what the opportunity might be for your community, and bringing about innovation in a way that feels local, feels authentic to you, and will do the things you want it to do. Bring back individuals who maybe are from there and moved away because they felt like there was an opportunity, or attract and incite new folks to move to town. So whatever it is your goals are, I want to speak to a little bit of all of that and how our organizations helps rural communities to deliver on those goals and understand that. So as a beginner, I will just say, if you're not familiar, Julie did a fabulous job, but the Center on Rural Innovation is a national nonprofit organization that is about 8 years old now and really exists for one chief reason, and that is because rural talent deserves the same opportunity as urban talent across the board. Our belief is very simple, that talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. So we work with rural communities and regions and the leaders and individuals who call those places home, and we help them envision and create opportunities that will then enable them to thrive in the tech economy. And why now? Ultimately, as you've heard and you're reading in your annual report, just seems like for Schoharie County and the region in particular, you're at an inflection point. The data shows this, qualitative, quantitative, your own action being here today. You've got the vision, you've got incredibly powerful broadband infrastructure and many other key assets that I'll get into a little later in this presentation. So people, place, and time all aligning. Those are some really critical factors, and want to dig into that a little more. And how we do this. Ultimately, when people, place, and time converge, we can plug in to support rural leaders, again, all across the country, though our roots are in Vermont. We now are a national, serving everywhere from Oregon to Alabama organization. And these leaders across the country are working on developing really custom strategies, building their ecosystems, securing funding, supporting entrepreneurs, building programs like accelerators and incubators, and growing tech workforces, understanding what gaps their employers may have to build out a custom boot camp that can train people in that one position they're struggling to hire folks for, or in some cases, having to hire folks from the big city and everybody's commuting or working remotely. So really, you can picture us as a Swiss Army knife kind of partner with rural communities. They plug in where they need leverage. We offer that sort of support, strategy, data, funding, navigation, program design, and leaders get to connect to a national peer network. So communities pull the tools they need when they need them, but as a central belief in our org, there is no one size fits all model. A rural community, every single one is going to be at a slightly different place depending on their assets, their previous investments or lack thereof in various industries and sectors. So really just taking a holistic picture of this and understanding that where your community and your region may be strong, those are some low-hanging fruit areas to begin building, and others, of course, we may acknowledge are weaker, and we usually take a strengths-based approach and begin where communities feel there's already some momentum. And that ties into our unique focus here at CORI, which you may have gotten a sense of already, even based on our name. But here at the Center on Rural Innovation, we work with rural communities on building pathways for their residents to access tech jobs and start startups locally. So for rural people to be the innovators and be those creators of technology, like in historically rural industries like agriculture and manufacturing. Why would it be that a person from big city X or Y would come to a small town or a farm and tell you how it's going to be? We just sort of fundamentally reject that concept that innovation is reserved for a privileged few. And again, this is in part because we see tech jobs and startups having an outsized positive impact on the global economy as well as particularly rural economies. And this is first because they grow fast. Computer and math occupations or tech jobs are projected to grow 3 times faster than the national average, which is a very strong signal of where opportunity is heading. Second, these jobs multiply impact. So for every high-tech job created, 3 to 5 additional local jobs are created in supporting industries. So that's everything from service roles to logistics to professional services and beyond. So it's really that multiplier effect for the tech jobs that are created, as well as the tech jobs raising the tax base. They pay more. So workers in highly digital jobs consistently, as we see, earn higher wages than those in less tech-enabled roles. And then that income can stay in the community and drive broader economic wealth, as we all know. And then one more powerful stat, because my background is working with entrepreneurs. Per the Kauffman Foundation, startups, or specifically firms less than 5 years old, create nearly all net new job growth in the US. So that means supporting entrepreneurs, not just good policy, but really essential for future job creation. And when we see rural communities invest in tech startups, tech jobs, growing these pathways, they're really planting those seeds for that sustainable ripple effect growth in the future. And this is, again, our unique focus, and it's particularly important because the truth is, over the last 40 years, economic growth has increasingly been clustered in large metro areas or places with strong, large universities, dense networks, and major employers. Rural America, of course, has created value, but captured less of it, less of the upside. And many rural communities have been just completely left out of this growth. Again, not because they lack potential, but because the systems and investments fueling the knowledge economy often didn't reach them. So this chart really speaks to that story and makes it clear. You can see the blue line shows how employment in large metro areas has steadily grown since 1970 or so, whereas the orange line representing rural areas has remained relatively flat. And you can see the opportunities then created by the digital age have not been evenly distributed. And that creates long-term consequences, as we all know. But the key point here is, of course, the concentration of prosperity is not inevitable. It's just the result of historic choices, but rural communities and regions can make different choices to shape a different future. And that's really the sense that I'm getting from you all in this organization in this moment in time. And again, to be clear, the goal here in closing this gap and seeing a much different chart and trend line in the future is not to blindly chase tech unicorns and innovation for the sake of chasing those trends, but it's to also really let existing businesses, from dairy processors to machine shops, layer tech on top of whatever they already do and allow for rural people to remain competitive and innovative in an evolving workforce in a global marketplace. I think I heard in the intermittent moment someone talking about the accelerating pace of technology and AI and just how, whether we like it or not right now, that pace is truly exponential. And we want our communities and the folks who call our communities home to feel prepared and that their region is doing everything they can to help people remain competitive and be able to be innovative in this very changing landscape we live in. Because the truth is, again, you all feel this every day in your communities and conversations with your kids, your neighbors, the gaps are showing up, that real impact showing up as outward migration, aging demographics. They're showing up as very real shrinking local economies in rural places, fewer job opportunities, local industries that haven't diversified. That narrative of like, oh, well, what would I come back? There's no jobs for me. There's no jobs for my kids. So talent leaves, especially young people, a workforce that's aging without enough replacement. These are common problems in pretty much most rural communities, if not all, to some degree that we work with across the country. And again, they are symptoms of being left out of the knowledge economy, as you know. They're interconnected. Fewer jobs means fewer people, which weakens civic institutions and can really make it harder to plan for the future. And again, some resistance to adopting technology from small businesses, all of these things converging to really make it challenging for rural communities to remain competitive and even start that climb up from the lower position that they're in. But again, that is the thing about these trends and this data. We know it can be reversed. We know it can be built forward, and we'll really work towards that for as long as we are an organization and working with rural communities. So this is part of our whole mission and belief, is that the tech sector is not out of reach. It's just currently not as accessible as it should be. It's underrepresented in rural areas. Again, not because of talent or potential, but because of structural barriers that we know we can dismantle together. And one thing we often hear, though, especially in rural places, is feels like tech is for somewhere else. But, that's not necessarily true in the picture that we like to paint. It doesn't mean tech is replacing Main Street. It means it's strengthening it. And in fact, when we see tech-based economic development work in rural communities, it often starts with tech-enabled businesses, a remote software developer, a rural telehealth startup, a local marketing firm that's doing national work. So these kinds of businesses that generate revenue, stay in the community, create jobs and demands for local services. It's really not about turning rural New York into a tech hub overnight, but it's about embedding innovation in ways that expand what's possible for workers and entrepreneurs and folks already rooted there, because we know there is, already a decent population. 5% or so of the tech workforce is rural Americans. But we would like that number to be 12% to really reflect the total share of rural Americans in the workforce writ large. So we know we can leverage, for example, something I'll speak to next and you all already established, historic investments and historic progress in broadband to start to reverse this trend and to uplift some of those innovators and remote workers and folks who may already be in the region, making up some of this 5% and starting to build on it. So we've talked about it a lot already, but really to highlight how critical broadband is as a foundational piece of the puzzle and a key asset that Schoharie County and the region can leverage. It's not just about broadband access, but about adoption. So what do people do when rural residents, or what do they do when they really put it to use? We see measurable transformational impact across local economies with broadband, and not just connecting homes and allowing you to do your work and school from home, but enabling people to start and run businesses locally. Where broadband is strong, entrepreneurship then flourishes. That is a very direct takeaway from the data. The growth rate of new businesses is 213% higher for rural communities with high broadband utilization. And that, of course, is not a fluke. It's the clearest evidence we have that digital infrastructure can kickstart a rural renaissance. And it's not just for starting businesses and, building that startup from your strong broadband. Overall, across the board, GDP is 44% higher in rural areas with strong broadband utilization. So this kind of infrastructure really enables economic activity and growth at every level you can imagine. Broadband alone, however, isn't the end goal. It is the foundation. And what we've seen is that when rural communities pair strong connectivity with support for tech skilling, entrepreneurship, innovation, the real transformation then begins. And that is what is exciting for you all, is that Schoharie County and the region is already ahead. You've got the broadband. You've got some incredible investments you've made to make it incredibly strong. So you've got some interest, you've got utilization. The question now is how to then activate further this infrastructure to grow tech jobs, to attract investment, and to build that resilient local innovation economy. So how do you do that? How can rural communities make it happen? We like to say it starts with intentional investment. And it's important to, again, note that what we're talking about here is not traditional economic development. It's really not about recruiting one big employer or hoping that factory reopens. It's about rather building an ecosystem, intentionally creating the conditions where tech jobs and startups can take root and grow. So how can rural communities practically enable more tech jobs and support startups? One thing we like to say is it starts with physical space. Those kinds of places where innovation can happen could be co-working spaces, like you'll hear about a little more in the panel, or these kinds of incubators, innovation hubs, essentially just the gathering, the watering hole, the spot where entrepreneurs and learners can congregate, build, collaborate, share ideas, realize, oh, hey, you work in digital marketing. I really need somebody to help me build out this website for the side gig I'm working on. Just creating that culture of innovation and collaboration. These spaces go incredibly far to help do that. On the workforce side, we look at training programs being aligned with real demand. So that means identifying in-demand tech roles and skills, working with schools, colleges, and employers to build the pathways and the training programs into those jobs. So we've seen real success here when communities can connect major employers with newly trained tech workers, tech talents, graduates of boot camps, certifications, skilling programs, really filling those gaps and attracting or retaining the necessary talent. Also, starting all the way from the very early stages, STEM education at the K-12 level, calling that out is absolutely key, planting the seed early and helping build, again, that culture of innovation and the spirit of possibility over time. And just acknowledging that it does have to start at the earliest possible levels with youth engagement. The challenge is multi-layered, generations long, but so are the solutions. They're very achievable with the right strategies, the right partnerships. And what's different here is the focus is not top down. And I think that speaks well again to your region, some of the successes you've already seen. It's activating what your community has already, some of the natural strengths and resources, and filling those gaps strategically. So it is a long game, but one with real lasting payoff. And that is ultimately what we mean when we talk about tech-based economic development, or TBED. It is really just a framework to think about growing your local economy, not about chasing Silicon Valley, but growing a homegrown economy that reflects your community's strengths, values, and vision for the future. So this sort of tech-based economic development framework is not meant to be one size fits all, but rather a flexible strategy that can help rural regions diversify their economies, attract investment, retain talent, and create those high quality jobs. And it works. Again, we've seen TBED not only strengthen local economies, but also shift mindsets collectively towards more innovation, risk-taking, resilience, and long-term thinking. Of course, it isn't a silver bullet, but in rural places that are ready to invest in themselves, it can really be a catalytic movement. And this is the moment to do it because, again, for you all, you've got the infrastructure in place, broadband, co-working spaces, you've got the energy of strong local and committed leadership, and you've got some partnerships that are already starting to align towards this effort. And that, again, also speaks to your quality of life and how that can drive economic attraction. So tech-based economies can help to fuel and to add to that. People ultimately choose places and communities holistically, not just their jobs. So small towns that invest in livability, attracting remote workers, entrepreneurs, and capital. This is really an area where your region is already quite strong. But again, continuing to make those investments to reinforce what a great quality of life you have creates this virtuous cycle, very real strength that you can build upon and create this kind of flywheel. So when startups grow, when local businesses start to grow, when remote workers, begin to get their jobs and become more visible, all of these things help and add to improving the quality of life. It is this cycle of reinvestment, and again, speaking to that long game. So building from within, creating those local businesses, leading to a more diversified economy rather than attracting one or two large outside firms or industries, further adding to the flywheel, further accelerating it, recognizing that knowledge will likely remain the catalyst for economic growth and innovation, and that regions with an attractive quality of life for high-skilled workers will have that advantage. That will be the competitive edge. And, acknowledging this is a fairly standard, not particularly groundbreaking comment, but just acknowledging and being patient that building this kind of quality of life foundation is a fantastic strategy and an addition and hope for your future regional competitiveness. So just kind of highlighting that as a lever to build upon, to think about what makes your community and your region nice already. It sounds like there's so many things. And you know it when you see it, you feel it all around you. Just to drive it home, what matters most isn't always, your natural amenities or cultural or recreational, but ultimately your ability to capitalize on all of that. For example, places with a lot of natural outdoor beauty, like a community we worked with, Durango, Colorado, saw lots of second homeowners, high net worth individuals, folks moving there after a good run in Silicon Valley. And there was nothing left for the local community. What do we do? We're getting priced out. And what they did was actually create a homegrown accelerator focused on helping local people start business concepts. A lot of folks had, ideas for outdoor recreation, innovative outdoor products, because there were so many locals who lived there with a love of the outdoors, hiking, skiing, mountain biking, you name it in Colorado. And so they leveraged that influx of high net worth individuals, new people, second homeowners coming in to create an angel investor network, a high quality mentor network of retired executives and individuals who just wanted to give back, a full scale startup program in a co-working space, an internship program where they could get free labor for those startups. And all of this focused on their community's natural strength of outdoor recreation, but turning it into a whole pillar of entrepreneurship and innovation. And that was inspired by their quality of life. What makes Durango, Colorado nice? Different, but maybe some similar things to Schoharie, in that if you love the outdoors, you want some wide open spaces, you want places to hike and bike and enjoy lakes and rivers, you got that. And you want proximity and access to global markets, expert networks, individuals who've been there, done that, mentor networks, capital. Those things can be created and brought to bear while also leveraging the really high, natural things that improve your quality of life. And that's all looking at that in sum, realizing what are some of these levers for you all. No community is going to check all the boxes perfectly, but where do you want to further build? And Durango is just one example of, okay, natural, lots of great outdoors, really good momentum here. Let's continue to follow that. Let's build upon what is authentic to us and our locale and try to really excite the individuals who've always called this place home into being part of what's next for us. And again, a lot of that was centralized in place because of this hub, a central force, a co-working space and an innovation hub, a place in the community that's, in our view, part of the infrastructure. Just like your broadband, your co-working spaces, your programs, your ways for people to come together and see how innovation and tech jobs and training and upskilling all, under one roof, for example, can complement your main street. So imagine having a sort of mixed use building with a coffee shop, maybe a little co-working space, some startup support, maybe some future of work or digital jobs, digital skills training, maybe some loft or living space on top, whatever it may be, these new kind of institutions and places that show people, again, there's opportunity here, there are like-minded people here, you can find and build community here, and ultimately we are making investments in the actual physical infrastructure of our community. You've already done so with broadband, you've got a co-working space. What are some additional sort of spices you want to put in this really delicious soup you're making, so that these kinds of assets can be further leveraged and brought to their ultimate opportunity. So that is really at the heart of what the core model that we use to think about building a rural tech economy. The basis of it all, like I mentioned, is this necessary infrastructure. Broadband, check. That's covered. Local leadership capacity, all of these folks in the room right here and many others who care about the region, who care about making the right steps towards the progress that you collectively envision. That capacity is clearly here. And then you've got those co-working and entrepreneurship spaces and places like your innovation hub, like your downtown Main Street hubs, where people can gather and build that culture. So once all of these things are in place, you can activate the two pipelines that really drive a tech economy. The entrepreneurship pipeline up here, which includes startup support and access to capital, and overall a culture that encourages risk-taking and innovation and support for all kinds. No college degree, computer science, business background necessary. If you've got a good idea, the community and the programming can show up to support you on how to bring that to fruition. That is really an important part of this, complemented by the tech talent pipeline, where there are opportunities for training and upskilling and programming that can connect people to those kinds of quality tech jobs, or to that course or that internship or apprenticeship that they need to then be able to step into that next step. So for them to visualize the pathway and understand that it is achievable, and that there's going to be a guide on the side in their community to help them take that every next step. Here's the next thing you do for your business, for your startup, for your career as a software engineer. All of these things come together ultimately when these systems can really converge. You see the outcomes that we know rural communities are optimizing for: quality tech employment, good jobs, and local wealth actually being created by startups, entrepreneurs, and innovators who call the community home. And ultimately what that builds is a stronger overall, more resilient rural economy. And the challenge is not whether this is possible. We know it is, we've seen it in other communities. It's really just how to connect and scale these efforts in a way that reflects your local realities and values. We don't impose templates or a rigid, this is the way it's got to be, because we know, we joke, but it's true. Once you've seen one rural community, you've seen one rural community. That's something we say at our org. They're all different. There really isn't a copy and paste model. So we build alongside communities, helping them envision that strategy. What works in Vermont or in Alabama or in Oregon won't be the same exact things that work in Schoharie, but the goal is to surface up to the top. What are those low-hanging fruits and the things that will help y'all build that shared actionable roadmap towards the innovation economy that will best resonate and suit you for a long and resilient future for the community? So at a high level, just to say, we will typically engage a community through a very comprehensive process, digging deep in an assessment, helping them understand, is the tech economy the right path? Because we also want to honor that different priorities require different actions at different timing. So starting with listening and really what you all are doing here, digging deep to ask the strategic questions, looking at what assets you have and thinking about where you could go. And then understanding those assets and how you want to prioritize them. What actions, what funding options, what implementation timelines make the most sense? Where might we need to build capacity? So co-creating this strategy, grounded in your reality and not theory, and then helping actually launch a pilot initiative. So do some kind of low risk, high impact effort that demonstrates what's possible. So we've seen communities do this in a rural coding boot camp, or an activation event for the mentors or potential investors or individuals at their local co-working space, just to get to know people and start to network. Or piloting what it would look like to start an actual local angel network with all the high net worth individuals that move to town, or the folks who you could sort of flip over a rock and find them. So all of these things serve as proof points, building momentum, attracting investment, and rallying your community around visible progress. And gathering the quantitative data, again, broadband access for you all, looking at talent pipeline, business metrics, and pairing it with qualitative insights from community leaders, workers, educators, and entrepreneurs. At the heart of it, overlooking really reviewing deeply these 8 pillars, everything from capital access to your community, deep, innovation infrastructure assets like co-working spaces, and really benchmarking where you are today, what is realistic and impactful to pursue next, and what matters most to the folks in your community. We have found in really digging into this kind of work that sometimes what a rural community leader thinks is the ultimate number one thing may be different than what the true sense of the community is. So just getting in to really be able to pulse check and understand where folks want to continue to build and invest can be a great strategy. And start to really just map where are we now, what's happening on the ground, and see what should we do, what's pointing the way forward. So grounding this reality quickly in an example of one rural community we worked with in Nebraska, which the story is probably like many, many communities they're familiar with, but they were seeing a lot of their young people leave the population and brain drain. And after college graduation in particular, they really wanted to reverse that. And they were interested in growing their local tech economy as a way to retain talent, attract it, diversify their industries, but really not sure where to begin or what assets were already in place for them to leverage. So I had the chance to work with them throughout the entirety of their process, going through a data assessment, like I outlined, a strategy, and then understanding, okay, what is that pilot program that we want to do? What is that quick and fast thing that we might be able to throw out into the community and see what the response is? And what they came up with was doing a hackathon, first ever in their community, student-led, in partnership with a local university. It was a really inspiring event where they galvanized students, not all tech students, some from computer science, some from business, some from ag, and they just helped them. We built this program to expose them to a sort of framework for coming up with an idea for a startup and then hacking away on it, building a very low code or minimal MVP, and then presenting, here's the tech solution we came up with as a collective experience, really just showing, you can be a problem solver, you can be an innovator. There are opportunities to apply what you know right here, today, and now in making your community a little bit better. So one of the things I loved was seeing a student who didn't really consider herself techie. She was from the ag program, was grew up on a farm. And in particular, she was struck by farm fires, the amount of, in her community at least, fires that were breaking out lately on farms. And some folks were just going through devastating losses with everything that they had experienced. And again, no tech background, but she had a clear vision and a strong willingness to use technology to activate more emergency responses when a fire breaks out on your farm, and rallied a team of more of the computer science, tech savvy students, built a little prototype, and she ended up winning the entire event and getting some funding and support from the local chamber to keep building out that idea. So just a small example, but it really stuck with me because helped plant seeds of real curiosity and confidence in this young student who might otherwise not see themselves very well reflected in the tech industry or as those opportunities being very real for her, but to see how it could actually be relevant to, yes, you have a tech curiosity about tech and maybe being a business owner or starting your own thing, but you don't know if that could fit with your passion for solving very real problems in the ag space. Turns out those things marry beautifully together. She just needed an opportunity to be exposed to that possibility. So everywhere from starting at the youth to the college age and helping people just see, hey, this is actually a thing you can do. There's this program, this boot camp, this hackathon, this mentorship network, you name it. And starting with what feels the most relevant is a great strategy, but offering those little activities, engagements, those touch points, and just seeing where there is traction. In this case, they were not expecting as many students to come to the hackathon. They thought, first time doing it, people don't really understand what this is, but we still pushed forward, did a ton of local outreach marketing, knocking on doors, going to churches, really doing everything you could possibly imagine. And they ended up getting 3 or 4 times the amount of people they thought to show up here. So it just goes to speak to being willing to take some risks and try some things, and leading me sort of towards the end here and asking yourself, are we ready? Are we ready to give it a go? Or what would it look like for us to begin something like this and really put a stake in the ground? And there's good news. You definitely don't need to have everything figured out to take that first step. In fact, most communities that begin this work are still asking a lot of the big questions in their earliest days. What really matters is having that core group of leaders who are ready and motivated and open to working together, and understand, you may be at a varying degree of readiness across some of these key ingredients, but to think about from where you sit. Do you have cross-sector engagement, folks from economic development, education, local government, and private sector all at the table or willing to come to the table? Because those individuals really form the basis of the vision and inform what the strategy and actions will be. Is there openness to new ideas? Is your community one that's ready to challenge the status quo and imagine new paths forward? Are there trusted local champions? So emphasize, doesn't have to be local elected officials, but could be anyone, K-12 teachers, Chamber of Commerce staff, folks from utility companies, even passionate community members who really want to make a difference, local co-working space operator, those folks who just really see and know at the heart of the community where the priorities lie. The ability to mobilize residents, especially for outreach and community listening and activation, clear priorities and readiness to build an aligned view on what matters, or a genuine desire to really define what those priorities may be. And then last, that shared vision, a community vision that leaders can tell and rally around, and really something that can get people nodding in agreement all at the same table. So doesn't have to be everything all at once, biting the the whole elephant, but rather, acknowledging it's may not be fully built out. It's just it's being committed and willing to explore what's possible. And that is more than enough to get started. So whether you're really, thinking about furthering it, building on the broadband investment, or ready to begin testing some new programs, it does feel from the data, from the investments you've made, that now is the time to work on aligning community vision with more concrete action. And you do have the necessary tools, broadband, key infrastructure, quality of life, resources, and such to make that leap. Not with the one size fits all model, not with a copy and paste of Silicon Valley or New York City, but through a process that really does reflect your people, your assets, your community, and your ambitions. And last, I'll just say we know this work is possible, again, because we have seen it firsthand. We have that community of practice I mentioned, our Rural Innovation Network, where we've worked with more than 40 communities across 25 states, from Appalachia to the Delta to the Midwest, all the way up to Vermont's Northeast Kingdom. They're all places that are building innovation hubs in former department stores or middle schools, or training high schoolers for tech careers, building apprenticeship programs, launching tech startups that can serve national markets from towns of under 10 or 15,000 people. And while there is no single playbook, they all have in common something really I think salient to leave you with, is that they have stopped waiting for someone to save them. And they've started building strategies that really reflect who they are and who they want to become. And it's very clear that that same spirit is alive and well in this region. So I just want to thank you all for the time, and really look forward to seeing the ways that Schoharie and SEEC will continue to innovate and build upon your strengths. Thank you.
Thank you, Molly. That was very compelling and insightful. For sure. We appreciate that. And we appreciate the work that CORI is doing. We know that you're not here yet being the key word, but doing great work around the country. We appreciate that.
Of course. Thanks.
All right. Are we ready for the panel? Was that
I think so.
panel time?
I think so. Yeah, we have plenty of time. Let's do it.
All right. Let's turn a little bit. So let's start out with each of you. Name, of course, a little bit of background, where you are working now. I'd like to know why you work and live here. Chris, sorry.
Awesome. Most of you know me as Chris. I'm in a different attire today. You used to be wearing muck boots covered in mud and tractor supply. Noise center of Farm Animal Sanctuary Carlisle, which is also a home base for where my tech operations are as well. So Member of SEEC, we do a lot of our board meetings and stuff here, and this is where I come when my spectrum internet goes out. I haven't been to them yet. I've spent the last 10 years in business operations, running different operations. I love startups, mostly ventures backed startups out of Silicon Valley. And the last 16 months I've spent building the OpenAI services partnership at a global consulting firm, spending a lot of time at OpenAI, the builders of ChatGPT, deploying for companies like John Deere, Spanx, wall-to-wall implementations of these technologies. So very tech-enabled career, and then now running the Alloy Network. One of our first ventures is our plans are at least to bring precision manufacturing to the next set of machinery technology that's going to be AI to the area.
Great.
Something local.
Great. Are you born and raised here or what?
I've been here for 5 years, born and raised in New York State, roots in Gilboa to a degree, but ended up at Scary because for a lot of reasons, one of them being proximity to industry and things like that, but also just the ability to own a home in part of the state that it was.
Great.
Ed Vale, so I am a senior account manager at a company called Amazon Web Services. So we are largest, most comprehensive cloud out there today. So I work with our customers that are currently engaged, so working with us already, and helping them basically solve problems and expand what they're doing for their businesses. I've been in B2B sales now for a little over a decade, both tech and tech adjacent, having spent some time at the analyst relations world, working with a company called Forrester Research. And before that, the record label for very short. There's some major changes in my life. But my wife and son and I moved to Middleburg in full time in August, bought our home back in 2021. We actually eloped in Jefferson in 2020. And coincidentally found our home in Middleburg in 21 and basically spent the last number of years fixing it up and getting it ready to be our home. So we moved in August. My funny was now in the 3PK school in Middleburg. And yeah, so I think what brought us up here, spent a lot of time, we were living in Brooklyn at the time. I'm born and raised in Connecticut, in southwestern Connecticut. And we spent a lot of time in the Catskills and coming up this area and finally said, why do we keep going back to Brooklyn? It's not really doing it for us anymore. So let's make the jump. And Middleburg has been fantastic in the sense of being able to fly out of Albany. I do a lot of travel with my work, as well as I still actually compete down to Manhattan once a week. So it's going to be through the Hudson train station. Yeah, we're about to have it.
We've known each other a long time, I guess.
Hey, so I'm Chris Lorat. I work at Microsoft now. It's my 4th time there. Yeah, I'm a little older than these guys. So I've had a pretty broad career. Started out at GE corporate research back then, just when the internet was starting to get going. Spent some time with Mark Andreessen. We founded Netscape, so the beginning of the browsers. Then got 20 odd years at Microsoft, left for a while, did a lot of stuff with Microsoft. First couple times there, different product groups, some development, stuff like that. Took a couple years off, taught computer science actually at a local high school, mostly because I saw the difficulty that we had at Microsoft hiring kids that had come out of secondary school in the US, right? The gap is amazing between what we do in the US and what other countries are doing now, unfortunately. Did that for a couple of years, went out, started a little software engineering startup. We just sold that in the last few weeks. And I figured, all right, I might as well go back to Microsoft. So I'm back at Microsoft now, which is sort of cool because, it's the next thing is AI. So I'm getting to work in AI a little bit before I ride up in the sunset, which every day, I say it's, another week, another month, a year at my age. So got probably another year. And I've lived near Square, grew up in Square County, Cobblestone. My father taught at SUNY Cobblestone for 30 odd years. And lived in Waynesburg, which the Lancet, it's the same hills that are here, for God, 20, 25, close to 25, 26 years. And the exact opposite, Ed, I was pretty much living at the Brooklyn Marriott for 15 to 16 or 17 of those years, because I commuted back and forth, and we didn't see a reason to move to the city. So I did that for a lot of years, and let's make what you.
Thanks, guys. And just we'll come back down the line. What brought you to 287 Main Street? Over this.
Geez, the easy answer is Julie.
So she twisted your arm?
No, the other way, I saw her out. So, no, I read, I still keep at the Times Journal, and I read a bunch of stuff on SEEC. And then one day I noticed an ad in SEEC, and I knew Julie ran it, so I came in one day and said, hey, a lot of tech companies are a lot remote now. So work out of a home office, like these guys, I'm sure, remote primarily, but coming somewhere where you can have like a professional environment is great. To just interact with people real is important. So that's great.
And
Yeah, I'd say throughout my career, I've used multiple different co-working spaces over the years, whether like big WeWorks or more local locations. And so when we were making the decision early last summer to move up full time, I basically just went on Google and said, where is there a spot in the proximity that I can be able to get out of that house and actually have a professional demeanor without my 3-year-old screaming in the background while trying to be on calls.
yeah,
So that's how I found this location, and sent an email to Trish, and next thing you know, she's showing me around, and I was like, you don't have to sell me anymore. Sign me up. So
glad to have this.
Yeah, I look at it the same way. I think it's a no-brainer, same sort of process. We were actually looking for a space to hold a board meeting that wasn't a kitchen table, the nonprofit. And we originally just reached out to book a meeting, not even realizing it was a co-working space. Just can we use a conference space for an hour once a month? And then quickly realized that it was a really good, a good fit for my business in tech. Like I said, legitimately, if the internet goes out, I have a place that I can run and sit and do meetings for 10 hours upstairs. And it's really a no-brainer. I mean, what for me, the most interesting impact I've had on myself and in coming here has been the people I've been able to meet and then hire and staff into some of these things.
Before we jump on, Molly, do you have anything? Any questions?
I was just interested if y'all, I mean, I spoke a little bit about some of the key assets and quality of life, and what, just from a personal standpoint, what makes you happy to be living where you are as a, not necessarily a comparison, but how is it better? A little bit I like to know than maybe previous big city life, or just how are you finding that trade-off of quality of life where you are and living and working remotely versus having some experiences in an urban center?
Jump in first. Okay.
I can jump in from the Brooklyn standpoint. So
Yeah.
I guess that's most recently, having spent about 5 years in Greenpoint and Williamsburg. It's like that, right? It's like basically the decision was pretty easy for us as folks who love being in the outdoors. I also, growing up, I grew up on a reservoir, so like in the middle of the woods. So it was, city wasn't necessarily my my first home by any means. So it was never the end goal. It was always kind of just a point in the journey, right? And so I think for us, it's being able to step outside of my back door and be in our yard, little, and not, stepping outside of Brooklyn was, you gotta dodge somebody or have someone yell at you for no apparent reason. And and so I think that was a big driver, and getting to say, hey, instead of paying money on a parking garage, I get to go buy a new side by side.
And then I'll out myself. So I grew up in Queens, actually. So I spent my entire life in New York City, commuting to Manhattan, spending $300 a month on a train pass to get to an office, to get on the phone and talk to somebody across the weekend. It made 0 sense to me the entire time I did it. Extremely high cost of living, extremely stressful lifestyle. And my wife and I, throughout COVID especially, found ourselves driving to areas like this to hike. And same sort of stories, decided not to drive back. So when we started looking for property, basically said anywhere outside of this window of big cities. I think what the biggest assets for me in Scary specifically, the reason we ended up in this county, because people ask every day when I get on the phone and I introduce myself and I say where I live, they say, but why? And for me, it's we've got 25 acres, an apple orchard, barns, beautiful home. And it costs less than half of a house in Queens to live in a shoebox. I think, but more importantly, I'm a avid supporter of local businesses. I frequent a lot of the smaller businesses and hang out and enjoy those conversations. I've come from an entrepreneurial family, and I think that entrepreneurial spirit, New York City crushes you to a degree where you're working in these giant corporate environments. I think here I've had the opportunity to start and succeed in a lot of different ways that I otherwise wouldn't have. My career has had a further reach from my kitchen table than when I worked in New York City.
It's amazing. Yeah, I'll share from our standpoint, about 20% of our bills go downstate, or they're out of the county. And during the 2020, 2021, we saw an influx of those folks that own second or third homes now moved up and were living here full time. We saw about half of them sort of drop back off, but there was about 125, around there that actually stayed. Which was amazing for us to see that, and probably,
I mean,
part of it.
I house in Summit on Eminence Road in Summit, the last house that you could possibly get to on Eminence Road. And the sell point for me, you could talk to Greg Law, the real estate agent at Chicago Realty, was Midtel had fiber optic at that house. So I said I could do my job.
There's some roads, we got fiber on, I'm still amazed.
We didn't get plowed, but we had fiber.
Do we have anybody in the crowd that has a question? Any questions for these guys? I've got more. There's some that got phoned in or came in on Instagram. I don't know how I got these, but I got more. Yes.
How do we get more folks like you, coming here to a space like SEEC's co-working space? How do we find you guys? How do we build more of that community and that ecosystem? Any thoughts on that?
I'll jump in. I spend a lot of time doing organically, so I can speak to it a little bit. I think the biggest, and I see this with local businesses as well, and I talk to a lot of local businesses about this. It's a fun moment to be doing this sort of, because so much of it is conversational, human to human still. And so much that goes on in the county, I think, is a lot of times you'll find out about an event after it happens, when someone tells you, why didn't you go to that? That was amazing. It was a lot of fun. And I think just building out those organic feedback loops of human beings in these areas that actually do this type of work. Green Wolf Brewing Company just closed, but it was one of the best community spaces that we had for a long time. And you'd go in there and you'd sit at the bar and you'd complain about work, and somebody understood the language you were complaining in, so then we realized they work in that same field. And those sorts of conversational networks. I mean, I haven't met a lot of you, but I have met some of you. And that in and of itself is a testament to the need for physically meeting with some of these people. I'm very vocally the biggest remote work advocate you can find on LinkedIn. I do think the power and reach you can have being able to work anywhere in the world where geography is not a restriction in your career is hugely powerful. I think it's hugely powerful for an area like this. But to get more human beings physically here, I know so many people that grew up in Middleburg, Breakabeen, Cobleskill have no idea that this place exists until we talk about it. And I've dragged some of them through the door to make sure that they come and they sit in here and realize that it exists.
Jim, there's 410 tech workers in Scary County right now. They're working remotely. It's CORI data.
So, well, I know, we had some people, wasn't quite as far out as Chris was, but we had some rural folks that, it was a second or third home where they were either downstate or in LA or one of those. And, it was always good for us to hear that their broadband, that their houses up here were as strong, if not stronger than where they were. But we do want to attract more, right? We really do. Molly's pitch or Molly's story hits home for sure. And, you know, it's not only the core reason that SEEC, you know, started, but there's a lot of us in the area that have worked at this for a long time. So it's nice to see some sort of steps. We want some larger steps, but you know, we'll take the baby steps for sure. There.
If I
Is
can,
there-
oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Just
No,
a interesting data point is that you actually have seen the growth in your share of employees working from home or remote workers in Schoharie County from 2018. That number was about 4.7% of your workforce. And in 2023, it had jumped up from 4.7 in 2018 to 10.4%. So some incredible, almost, you know, doubling or more growth between 2018 and 2023. We all know a little bit of what was going on in our country there. So you did see a really, you know, significant growth in remote workers just in the last now 7 years or so. And I imagine it's probably only continuing, or at least a really steady flow now built on that, but loving the conversation of just how can we create more of this. So wanted to add that that is some of the more significant growth that we've seen and is on par with more of what the whole country had been seeing in that time as well.
Yeah, that's great. And Molly, to your point, it is what you're seeing across the country as well.
It is for across the country, but that's far greater for Schoharie County versus other rural communities. So you absolutely outperformed most rural communities and we're on par with what even some metro areas we're seeing in terms of share of remote work jumping up.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I
Along
would
those-
also, I'm sorry, I just meant to
No,
add your broadband infrastructure growth, I feel is also deeply correlated with that, the adoption and utilization and just really high, also better than the national average for the United States quality of life, like I was talking about. All of these things I think converge to create the optimal conditions for this in Schoharie County.
Yeah, and I hope we can use those, right? I hope we can build upon that foundation for sure. And I just, along those same lines, so the word of mouth or the conversational piece, is there, you know, there's normally 3 or 4 or 6 like methods that it takes to get these out there, and we're on Instagram, from Facebook, right there, but are there other social media platforms, or are there other platforms that we should be using to get our information out?
Oh, I was gonna say, I don't know if it's necessarily a platform. I think I would echo Chris's sentiment of like it's meeting, right? And I think it's having a human-to-human connection and expanding and saying, oh, we have something in common in terms of what we do or what we're focused on. Let's build upon that. Like I'll say, Middleburg Coffee is a great example of like I've met a bunch of people just like going in there and even Dasha was introducing me to people that she's like, oh, you probably get along with this person. And it's great. Like it's things like that. I think because if you think back to even I think of the city, right? Going into a coffee shop and working out of a coffee shop is something that I would do regularly, and it was a way that I met people all the time. That and even back in the record label days was a way of expanding my personal network at the time and creating some business ventures actually back then. So I think it's being able to find folks that are kind of focused on the same broader scope of things and just creating a human to human network in that sense.
Yeah, I joke a lot with some of the business owners, but I think the single greatest investment the county could be making right now is commercial kitchens. Because the more physical spaces you can go sit, have lunch, hang out, meet people. There's 40 people here that I would love to get lunch with, and not a ton of options from where I can go right now to do that. So you know, being able to have the capabilities at Love Shine Tea to sit and have a sandwich or something like that, or even like smaller entrepreneurial, exactly, whatever it might be. I think that there's a resurgence of that stuff, people wanting to come out of the woodwork. There's a lot of us that come here with the express purpose of getting outside more. And everyone who works from home will attest to the fact that the single greatest part of your day is when you go to Price Chopper.
Chris, you were gonna add something to it.
I think, like, in terms of collaborative workspaces. To me, it's almost a place like this is, if you build it, will come. The trick is why we would come. Probably, in my opinion, the biggest thing is the non-negotiables broadband, because we need it to be remote, but in all honesty, companies like Microsoft, I know I've read a bunch on Amazon about it, if you look at Bank of America and other places, they're trying to pull people back into the office, right? So in terms of Microsoft, we have to, if I can commute to New York City if I want to, that'd probably be the closest office, maybe Cambridge, Mass, but you typically, you have to have a valid reason for doing 3-hour commute choice, a valid reason for the most part, but I think to get people like me that are willing to stay, or these guys to move here, you need the broadband, because it's a non-negotiable, even though remote work, I think if you just rely on that as a sole strategy, is not going to be good enough. There has to be a reason why Ed would stay. Not saying you would, you believe Amazon needs to stay here, right? So it's, but once you get past the obvious, I think my kids are older now, but, and actually, when Chris brought up the fact that Greenville closed, our kids, our first teacher in private school was actually Justin's wife Tracy. She had a farm city school, and we loved the idea. So that's how we first met them. So she was one of their first teachers. But having school districts with viable and competent STEM programs is key, right? Because people that come from our industry tend to want our kids to at least be exposed to it in a manner where, and if you, in a manner that's applicable and actually will drive them. I don't want to say drive them towards that, because you don't want to drive your kids to one area. In other words, you want to expose them to it. You're into, like, my son's a computer science major at George Mason now. My daughter, she was a whiz at math, but she preferred human services. And it's like, just to expose them to things and let them do it. But if you look at New York right now, I think that the most recent numbers, about 4% of kids actually take a computer science class in New York, which is ludicrous. It's significantly higher though in New York City. I think the last thing I read was New York City, about 20%, maybe a little less, 18% get exposed to it. So if half the kids are in New York, what does that say about the rest of the state? Maybe 2% of the kids get computer science exposure. And having been a computer science teacher for a couple of years, I saw it in my classroom. So I think broadband, you have to have access to STEM. Your commercial fishing point was spot on. Somewhere good to eat, to go out to dinner, walkable downtowns, all the stuff that's working on now are all things that would maybe make. It's more important to keep an Ed or Chris than me, because I'm old, but maybe make them say, all right, it's worth leaving Amazon and going to the Alloy network, because there's all this stuff here to keep me. That's sort of my perspective.
And I think that's a good point as well. So there's sort of two schools of thought in the remote work world. One of them is working with one of these giants. I think we all spend some time getting beat up in a giant, so we exit out to go with something smaller, something.
So let's go back.
It's a guilty pleasure. You go back and I mean, the only way to work with a company like a spec, they're done is to go work. But really cool. Something from I had access to the CTO of John Deere, and that's just fun to do. Where I'm operating now is a little bit different, and I think something that's been very fun for me, and I talk about this a lot, is we have volunteers that come and work at the sanctuary, and I've had an opportunity to meet some of them, and they're in their 20s, or they just out of college, or maybe they dropped out of college and we really went. Or they built a computer and they want to tell you about that, or they like to play video games and they want to tell you about that. I've been dragging them in the house and sitting them down with a laptop and letting them build with ChatGPT and showing them sort of the basics and what would you do if you could do anything, right? Like literally, if this thing can think for you, what problem would you solve? And I've converted some of those people into contract workers now, who then can now make money with a skill that they wouldn't have had access or exposure to. To speak to the sort of like accelerant idea that I think Molly had earlier, which is the pace at which this technology moves is extremely rapid, uncomfortably rapid. You live in this constant state of something probably came out in the time that we've been sitting here that will change what I did yesterday. And that's a hard thing to sell into enterprise. John Deere moves a little slower than that. So you have to sort of go down market and mid market to really play in the innovation space. And I think what's amazing about Scary and what's interesting about Scary is this technology, the way in which we're talking about it right now is extremely focused on computers, right? It's all focused on the internet version of this. It's all moving very physical, very fast. So BMW rolled out a bunch of Figure robots in Stratford, North Carolina. We have fully autonomous humanoid robots working in the factory now. There's going to need to be entire supply chains built around that, entire manufacturing supply chains, servicing supply chains, insurance supply chains. It's a massive opportunity for rural areas like ours to own parts of those components and parts of those ecosystems in a really meaningful way. And those are tech-enabled jobs. Those are going to be fairly standard long-term career choices and operations. So I think for me, that's where I'm trying to think 5-10 steps ahead of where we are right in this moment. I think we have an amazing local university to tap into. I think we could be doing more there. There's a very interesting story and probably idea to be had with why aren't more university students here? Because if we're sitting here, we're going to help them get those jobs at Microsoft, Amazon, Gallup Network. And that's the talent. When I put up a LinkedIn post to get 1,000 job applicants, I'd rather be able to go run and grab a cup of coffee with you when I'm going to interview you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please, Dustin.
I know we're talking about technology and some of you have moved, into rural areas from downstate. What about the idea of community? How do you build a community to benefit those of us who perhaps are in the softer professions, and don't, aren't so techy, but love this town, love this area, want to see it grow, want to support SEEC? You're kind of operating in isolation versus connection unless you go and get a cup of coffee and a scone.
Well, I think that's kind of what we're talking about with like the cup of coffee and the scone. How do we expand that, right? And like have these watering holes where people are just kind of spending time at to be able to expand that type of conversation.
About your families too,
Well,
that's the wife at home on the farm,
yeah, that's a great point. And actually, one of the things that I think my wife and I have actually struggled with since moving has been finding like a babysitter. It's like being able to have a night out to go get dinner together, right? Because we've only been in the neighborhood now for 8 months or so. So haven't really been able to meet families who might have, kids who are of age to want to babysit and do that type. So being able to build something like some kind of local social network, like even in that sense, would be amazing, right? Like to be able to have that type of communication and build trust that way, I think, is a real opportunity as well.
I think a lot of it's just organic. I mean, there's nothing special about tech, right? What's the big deal if I work at Amazon or I work at Stewart's down the street or I work, Harva, another local one here. At the end of the day, it's organic, right? I have kids, my kids talk to other kids, I meet people, I talk to other people, and so I work at Microsoft, so I'm like, to me, it's the same thing. There's nothing different about it. It's just it's sort of like when I was teaching, right? The more knowledge, regardless of what your field of expertise is, right? The more knowledge you can seed out into students or will help it organically grow, right? So if I taught 50 kids a year, 100 kids a year, if 5 of them took computer science in college, or I did that, computer science, computer engineering, it seeds that organically, and a lot of those kids grew up in a rural community, so they're going to, some of them, say some percentage will come back and stay in the rural community. So I think it's just organic. I don't think there's anything special to it being tech versus anything else.
I just want to add to that because I feel like it's also at the roots of it, it's starting, all the new people that are coming, we're slowly creating it. And we're all like in the same predicament of like, I can't find a babysitter or how to go out. So start creating the mom groups, moms are meeting each other. It's rising right now at the moment. And I feel like I give so much credit to SEEC because SEEC helped us so much. Like personally, our business, I'm a Middleburg coffee owner, if somebody doesn't know me. They provide so much information and create so many events. And I feel like all these little things we can complement each other. Like, if people wanna work, at the moment, we don't have enough space, we're working on expanding, actually, because of Trish. We want a grant through Sony Cobblestone to IRB, Youth University of Rural Vitality. So I just wanted to say that if somebody wants to work and have a private conference room, calls for a meeting, or they need a like quiet space, we send them here. We have a free passes that SEEC provides, so we can tell people if they lost internet in the mountains somewhere in the farm, they come down to us and we can say, oh, hey, yes, it's loud here, but you can go to this space, you can check it out. As well as SEEC offers all these events and collaborates like Luciana, and dancing, social dancing night, they have a whole day retreat and yoga classes, so that's how a lot of people find out about this space in particular. Not necessarily like an advertising newspaper or a billboard, but by offering all different kind of options. So it doesn't eliminate it just to remote work professionals. So
I thought a lot about that because generationally, we've been here, there's a lot of us, right, that's families that have known each other for each other. Chris and I literally have known each other probably since we were 12. That's what. But I've often wondered about that, right? Like the transplants or the people that move in, like how do they start to build that? So that's a great.
I love this question too. I think the notion of like isolation is the antithesis of why a lot of us have ended up here. I'll give a concrete example. Like Michelle Rivera texted me at 7:30 saying, hey, my car is gonna be getting dropped off. I think you're on the way. Can you be carpool? So yeah, we end up carpooling. We have, you know, from a perspective of whether or not we support each other locally and in that community. I mean, I spent last week, I spent 2 full days at Oppenheimer Farms out in Dorwood, inoculating mushroom logs. They came over to our place. We inoculated 150 mushroom logs. We had 4 guys working, you know, from 8 in the morning to 8 at night, just sitting, hanging out, doing work, farming. And I think those are the sort of real world experiences that are enabled when we're in this area. I think there's a level of latitude to in remote work to take a Thursday off and stand outside and inoculate mushroom logs that doesn't exist if you're in a Walmart, you know, logistics center, or you're in a 1 million square foot logistics center. There's really nothing you can do. You don't have that same flexibility to establish yourself within the community. You know, everything from we came up here with the express purpose to have space, have land, go to the greenhouses at Barbara's, hang out with Cindy, grab a coffee with Emily. Like there's real human beings in the mix here. And there's a level of knowing them on a first name basis, hanging out. So when something breaks, you know who to call. If you need something delivered, you need a piece of machinery you don't have, and someone will come and bring it to you. And I think that sort of thing, complementary to, hey, now I remember so-and-so mentioned that he used to work at XYZ company and I need that role now. I can pick the phone up and know they'll answer. Or, oh, that person's husband actually does this. I need that. I'm gonna call that person. I think that's the sort of organic community. I think what's interesting about the generational component of this too. I was at the Ag Expo at SUNY Cobblestone a few weeks ago in my farmer version of me, trying to figure out the other biggest thing I think is relevant to this conversation as well is land access and capital access are the 2 things that people like me and people like them need. That the older generations, the families that have been here for decades, they have that. They have the ability to help us figure out where are we doing these commercial operations, how are we capitalizing them, how are we sort of setting up the basis for the next decade to move. We can be the entrepreneurs. We absolutely need to figure out a way to bridge the gaps. You and I think have spoken over email, but never in person. And figuring out ways to do that, SEEC is that place.
We have time for one more
Well, I was just
question
gonna
before
kind
we
of
go.
go back to your point and a little bit about what you were saying. I moved here a couple of years ago as well. I worked remotely for the last decade for a boutique food system consulting firm before I started working at the county this fall. But my experience has been similar in that trying to find community, trying to find those social spaces. I found SEEC because I live in Seward, one of the very underserved areas of the internet in our county. Really excited about that broadband build out. But you know, internet wasn't working, found SEEC actually from these other young farmers that live behind us who were like, there's a co-working space in Schoharie. And I was like, what? I had worked out of WeWorks in, you know, Fulton Center. And trying to find, I just want to stress that like, my job was not a techie job. I worked with farmers remotely. And the number of other young moms and women that I have met here that don't have techie jobs but rely on internet, right? That work in insurance, that work in banking, that work remotely because it's a quality of life thing because you have young children and there's no childcare. That this also could be a space for them too, and that having social spaces that has reliable internet, that builds community is also part of this whole quality of life, community building. And I think that that's just, I know that this is very much focused on building the tech economy but I think there's so much remote work that happens that has nothing to do specifically with like AI and technology and Amazon and Microsoft.
It's equally as important.
Yeah, and there's so many more of us that I think, especially if you're a woman and you have young children, it's even harder to find those people. And then once you do, you are speaking the same language. You're like, oh yeah, like I'm on the Zoom call and my 5-year-old is like naked running the like was so awkward, whatever. I mean, that's an experience that all of us have had. And it was so great coming here where that was not the case. And so I do think that there's this social aspect where you don't have to be technological, you just need internet and want to connect with other people. So that's just
Great.
anecdotal.
Thank you for sharing.
I'll do
And that is
one
important.
That's the screaming 5-year-old, the barking dog is an irrelevance now, right? Everybody who works remote is used to it and everybody just says,
It's still
oh.
so embarrassing.
But-
You're just like, oh.
But nobody cares, right? So to your point, it's like, who cares? So then if you have STEM programs, the good restaurants, the walkable downtown, people are going to come here. They're gonna come to SEEK for a day or 2 a week because you want to get out of the house, but it's gonna just organically happen. As long as you have the things that'll bring people here. That's the key.
It's just amazing quiet. Yeah, sometimes I ran away from the shop and from the house, and all the distractions just sit here and quiet and focus on the things I need. Yes. It's been great.
All right, we are butting up against our time. Molly, do you wanna wrap us up or do you have any
Yeah.
last words?
I actually wanted to visit back a point someone made a while ago now about the commercial kitchen and just in general, all of the great commentary towards quality of life, building amenities, just doing things that will overall uplift your community. And to the last point of, tech and innovation being huge pieces of the puzzle for your future, job opportunities, ways to think about upskilling folks, but the broader community benefiting by the multiplier effect that tech jobs create, right? Additional jobs outside of that come along with it. The greater restaurants, school systems, parks, all of the natural beauty you have, all of these things sort of lifting all boats through the rising tide of building a stronger, more diversified and innovative economy, which just sounds like there's so many things there to build towards that and point towards that. The commercial kitchen point I think is interesting because it sounds like something that might fit with you all. In a rural community, Independence, Oregon, they have a commercial kitchen space where people are testing out concepts, bringing new local food and farm to table. And they do this thing that's a monthly supper club where a different food entrepreneur will team up and kind of do a pop-up night. And folks can buy tickets, show up, get to build community with each other. It has nothing to do with tech, but it's at the incubator and co-working space where the kitchen exists as well. And it's just like these kinds of ideas, y'all are full of them, but little things you can do to help build community, build bridges, bring in people from all walks of life to see whether or not I'm a techie or a coder, a remote worker, or a mom on the farm, or a dad, trying to get back into it after my pivot, my career, whatever it may be, that there is a space for truly everyone in this work. And we all benefit when we create a more resilient economy, more opportunities for ourselves and our kids. And just seems like all of the ingredients are there for y'all to create a really delicious next chapter of your story and a really exciting moment in time. So I just wanted to say thank you again for the time to be here, because I'm just very inspired by the conversations that are happening and all of the resources and assets that y'all are, I think, bringing to bear to make this happen and bring it to the next level. So excited to stay tuned, and just thank you so much again for the time.
Thanks, Molly. Well, we got, the preview, excellent job. We probably could have gone another hour. Which maybe between 10, some point. I also want to volunteer you for if we have an entrepreneurship contest and competition in the future to be on the review panel or next to that. Okay, great. Well, thank you. Great job, guys. That wraps us up, right? All right. Thank you for 2 hours of your time this morning. Appreciate it.